I mentioned earlier that we want homes, not houses. We want to build places, but not building sites. We want connectivity, amenity, sustainability, prosperity, not too much to ask. But as the Minister said, he'll play his part, he'll agitate when he needs to, and he'll get out of the way when he can. But how else can we unlock the homes we need, the jobs we desire, and the amenity that we crave? Well, if I'm reading the program right, it's transport. So we're about to hear from a panel who will tell us about TODs and metro lines, and dare I say, how we might actually be able to deliver on our ambitions via government collaboration with the private sector. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a reminder to exercise your opportunity to contribute to the conversation. We'll be using the Slido platform once more for this session, and the details are up on the screen. So if I can introduce the panel, please. Introducing Lindy Deitz, CEO, Campbelltown City Council. Saeed Hirsh, Head of Strategy, Planning, Innovation at Infrastructure New South Wales. Fiona Jones, Development Director, Stockland. Peter Regan, Chief Executive, Metro Sydney Metro, beg your pardon. And to provoke all the answers, Naomi Mitchell, National Managing Partner of Enterprise, KPMG. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Excellent, we're all settled. Well, good afternoon, and I would like to welcome our panel to our conversation this afternoon. Transport as the key to unlocking homes, jobs and amenity. So let's start with you, Syed. How much new housing is the TOD program expected to deliver, and can we expect more accelerated TOD precincts in Greater Western Sydney, but specifically along the Western Sydney Airport Metro line?
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe just in the beginning to understand what the TOD program is, it's really just about government looking at where it had invested significantly in all kinds of transport capacity, which is generally our most expensive item, where we already have quite a lot of, say, the other expensive item, water, sewer, and that type of infrastructure, and to enable more housing there, and other aspects of it. So generally what is expected to happen there is there's been various kind of release of what are called TODs now, transit-oriented developments. And I think what the Minister said around focus on a few areas, there's a lot of people coming to say, can I have a TOD here, have a TOD there? The idea really is just make sure that we have a manageable set, and more will be coming at some point, I believe. But for the ones that have been released already, we're probably talking over the next 15 years, circa 170, 180,000 homes to be delivered in these areas, with the bulk of it in the first release, which is around 50,000 houses over the next 15 years. And I believe more will be announced, more will be zoned over the coming period.
And tell me, how is the government working with the private sector to ensure that future housing is actually coordinated and delivered with supporting infrastructure? I
mean, there are many channels. I think in the beginning, informally, I think at Infrastructure New South Wales, I can't count how many meetings we have every week, almost with the peak bodies, development bodies, and so on, that are coming with great ideas, as well as a number of roundtables, whether it's with contractors or developers or industry more broadly that we're having. And that's kind of helping, at least from our perspective, advise into government as what we can achieve with these housing targets, or where we should focus our efforts. On top of that, there are formal programs. The Department for Planning runs the Urban Development Program, which ourselves and others, councils, industry participate in, and the infrastructure agencies, and that kind of focuses on specific areas of activity. So there are many channels. Obviously, feedback from sessions like this is also valuable. I think the Productivity Commissioner, when they published their report, also engaged significantly with the private sector to get to the recommendations they got to. So there are many aspects of the engagement and collaboration because ultimately, apart from social housing, we do not build any of the houses. So if we don't get that right, then that engagement, then we're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah, okay, no, fair enough. And so I think, Peter, given that, why wouldn't we make every metro conversion and station in Western Sydney Metro line a Tier 1 TOD accelerated precinct?
Well, certainly there is a wonderful opportunity to consolidate housing around most of the metro stations, and certainly along the Metro West route that is already happening at most of those stations. On the Western Sydney Airport Metro line, certainly 4 of the 6 stations on the first stage of that line, so St Mary's, Orchard Hills, Luddenham, and down at Bradfield would all support sort of different types of housing and mixed-use developments around them. So there is a very significant opportunity. Obviously, we're in construction, and there's some of those sites will take some time to develop out, but the real benefit of the Western Sydney Airport Metro is, unlike most rail lines that have been built historically in Sydney, it's being built in advance of that development, which will then cluster around it rather than having to retrofit back under sort of developments that have already taken place.
Okay, perfect. And I think given that, really what are the primary considerations when it comes to selecting the TOD precinct sites, and then when can we expect more to be announced?
So there are a lot of considerations, as already noted. Certainly the access that the Metro provides is a really key driver in terms of being able to move significant numbers of people quickly. But I think also the sites that work best are ones that you can also have very good feeder transport services, so whether that be buses or other interchange, good focus on the layout of those precincts for active transport, for walking. And certainly we look in concentric circles around those stations, and certainly around that 800 metre mark, 10, 12-minute walk is a really great catchment for people just to be able to walk to the metro or the infrastructure, the railway infrastructure. But ideally, if you can extend that either down corridors with rapid local bus services, then you can go out 1.5 k's, 2 k's, and that's a real focus. And so not all station sites lend themselves as well to that, but certainly it's been a key factor in the decisions around where those stations on Metro West and Western Sydney Airport Metro will be, and nearly all of those stations support that opportunity in turn when it's ready to come.
Excellent. And I think whilst we're speaking about walking to sites, I might actually hand to Lindy now. So Lindy, obviously Campbelltown's housing strategy supports the principles of growing housing density with a convenient walking distance from transport hubs and town centres. And I know that the vision for the city centre aligns with the concept of TODs, and arguably Campbelltown's LGA is well placed to accommodate high quality density along its railway corridor, both sustainably and affordably. Yet despite this, Campbelltown's strategic positioning, the TOD program does not mention Campbelltown LGA. So Lindy, to you now, is that actually a missed opportunity?
100% it's a missed opportunity. Macarthur alone can contribute 120,000 dwellings to the housing targets. Campbelltown Station alone is 17,000, and largely all the land holdings are owned by local government. So it is absolutely a missed opportunity. It's on the T8 line. It goes directly without having to get off to Sydney Airport. Pretty sad I'm saying that, isn't it? Because we can't even get to our own airport, yet we can get to Sydney Airport in 30 minutes without hopping off the train. So I think it is really important that we look at that T8 line. We have 7 opportunities in Campbelltown, 7 railway stations. None of those are currently TODs, and I can't get a clear answer why. But absolutely happy to play the game, happy to contribute to the shortage in housing supply.
Excellent, thank you. And I will come back to you because our top ranking question, but I'll get to Fiona first because it's for the two of you. So, Fiona, very simple question for you. Should we double the TOD radius from 400 to 800 metres as recommended by the recent Productivity Commission report, which says that this would actually quadruple the uplift? And if so, should we remove the apartment design guidelines?
Good question. Look, I'll start by saying at a national level, 95% of our population is in our 5 largest cities. So densification is only going to continue. And around transport hubs, that's where it makes sense. I think we at Stockland really applaud the government with the recent rezonings in the Todd precincts and the planning reform that sits with that. Is everything right? Probably not, but it's really a step in the right direction. And the 60,000 homes that they say that can be delivered there, us in the industry have to work with government to deliver those. Do we include the radius? Yes, I do think that we want to densify and provide housing around transport nodes. ADG, look, I think we want to deliver good quality homes. I think everyone in the industry wants people, when they live in their homes, to be proud to live in them. I think good design is something that we all want to deliver. ADG, can it be flexible? We're looking at some international models at the moment that probably have smaller apartments. That is probably something that we can look at, but I think we've all just got to collaborate together and provide housing because we need the supply.
Okay, excellent. And I can't ignore this Slido that is buzzing in front of me, and we are going to circle back directly to Lindy and Pete because you're our leading question. So how can we better connect Southwest Sydney to the Western Sydney Airport and all the job opportunities that we want to create in that region? So I'll let you take it in turns.
Yeah, sure. So I read about some of this in the paper this morning, actually. We are doing business cases for extensions for the Metro Western Sydney Airport line, looking at connection north from St Mary's up towards Marsden Park, Schofields, Tallawong, and that connection and that alignment would significantly increase the catchment of the airport and provide opportunities for a greater number of people along that line to be able to get to different places of work and different housing opportunities. Separately, we're working with Transport for New South Wales, looking at options in the south and the southeast of the existing metro at Bradfield, and certainly pointing towards Campbelltown and Macarthur. And certainly there is a substantial task to look at what those opportunities and where that alignment would be to get from Bradfield down through that area, looking at options for Oran Park, Narellan, and then Campbelltown and Macarthur themselves. And that certainly would then provide that direct connection and a really significant north-south spine for Western Sydney. It's at a business case stage. Those business cases are funded, and we're doing that work for government at the moment.
I guess my greatest concern is that this strategic transport planning wasn't done 10 years ago. We've known for a very long time that Macarthur is the fastest growing region in Australia. I think if you want a very successful Western Sydney Airport, I think it's critical for government to prioritise the link from Campbelltown directly to the Western Sydney Airport. It should not be staged. You will continue to isolate existing communities. That isolation will create a cost to government anyway. From other components in terms of mental health, domestic violence, all of those things come with isolated communities. So the longer you leave them disconnected, the worse the cost to government is. So from my perspective, the only solution to this is to prioritise. We shouldn't have to wait 30, 40 years for a rail connection to Western Sydney Airport. So I think it needs to be government's number one priority, and it should not be staged.
Excellent, thank you. All right, and we'll move to our next top ranking question, which I'll open up to the panel, so grab your mic. How can we explore different funding models to continually deliver new metro stations to the network to make our metro network world-class and connecting most of Sydney? Over to you.
There we go. Certainly, linked to the previous topic, the opportunity around stations on land that is government-owned land that we've either purchased for construction or is adjoining government-owned land does provide a very significant opportunity if those housing developments and the mixed-use precincts around them can be packaged and linked and to contribute to the cost of the stations. I think there's a whole raft of measures that people talk about in these forums around broader value captures and levies, but certainly our primary and initial focus is on the land that the government owns itself and how that can be packaged in the way that the private sector can invest and take exposure over time to bring those sites to market, but actually contribute to the cost of the station itself. It's not particularly complex, but it requires a lot of planning up front to do that. On the metro alignment, in the higher value areas, clearly there is an opportunity to do that in a more integrated way from day one, and certainly develop above the station as part of the construction of the station. And there's some fantastic opportunities in places like Parramatta that we're pursuing at the moment to do that, and right here at Olympic Park, in fact.
Okay, excellent. Did anyone want to add anything?
It's not very complicated. You can pay for it through revenue and fares, and you can pay for it through land through 50 different ways that are done around the world. And all of it is whether you can have a mechanism from a New South Wales context, or you can't, or there's a will to do it or not. So it's not terribly complicated, but it just seems to be difficult to get over the line. And we generally are very sensitive in Australia and New South Wales over fares, so we don't increase fares very much. We want to get patronage and so on. So that makes it quite difficult to fund sometimes. But as Peter said, it's not complicated if we want to do certain things, but generally they're going to revolve around development and land and precincts around the area.
Look, I'll just add that I think from a strategic planning point of view, that government and industry are much better at looking at sites now and thinking about how they need to be rezoned, how you bring in infrastructure contribution plans to deliver the infrastructure and amenity to support those metros. Then I think probably development was quite siloed 20 years ago. I feel now that the development industry, the CHPs, government, and bringing in capital partners as well is really making development more feasible and allows infrastructure then to be delivered.
Excellent. Keep that mic. Oh, sorry.
Just also add, it is going to be very different what you do in metro extensions to the southwest of Sydney, for example, because if you wanted to fund stuff, it's not going to just be funding the metro scheme. A lot of the greenfield areas will require a lot of other infrastructure that you need to pay for. We also like to create environments that are nice, so even in the well-established areas, the likelihood is we can't just stack apartment blocks above each other. People don't accept them. And government is sensitive over these things, so we want to create other more, better environments, better density. So in some way, it's not just funding the metro, and that won't be unique to Australia and New South Wales. It'll be found in other places. Once you start wanting to create good environments, good precincts, you have to pay for other things as well. And that, it's a good thing that we look at this stuff, but it's not just about the core infrastructure a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, perfect. And so, Fiona, looping you back into the conversation directly with one of the questions here, how is the private sector responding to TODs currently, and what is the best practice to support new housing and amenity?
Yeah, so I think there's different scales of opportunities in the TOD precincts, and Base hasn't come out yet. That will come mid-next year. That's all government-owned land. So I think that there's a really good opportunity there to do quite considerable affordable and market housing with amenity that will be around a metro station in 2032. Where the TOD precincts have multiple land ownership, I think what we'll probably see there is smaller scale developments, because you either have to amalgamate land, which can be really hard, particularly where there's private land ownership, or we'll see standalone buildings with amenity underneath it and apartments above. So I think there's the opportunity for everyone to participate, which is great. And I think Stockland certainly sees themselves playing at the larger scale developments, and then I think some of the more small private developers are going to be best placed to do those sort of standalone buildings.
Okay, so there's an interesting one here, and I'll just open it up to the panel and pick up the mic when you're ready. So many of the TODs have prioritised retaining predominantly infeasible office development over housing. So how do we get the needle rebalanced towards today's needs, being housing?
I think part of the challenge, clearly property markets go in cycles and they go up and down, and when some of the previous decisions were made around potential use around some of the metro stations, the commercial market was much more attractive from an investment point of view. Clearly at the moment that's not the case, and there's also a much stronger focus now on really trying to utilise the benefit of the high-capacity transport to encourage density. And I think there's a real openness to that, and the TODs and the other sort of planning changes provide opportunity potentially to make that more attractive from an investment context as well. So certainly, the process that Sydney Metro is following, other than where there might be a couple of examples where sort of a commercial focus still makes the most sense, but nearly all of our sites, even the ones that currently have planning approvals in that commercial space, we're very open to looking at other options for those to be converted and to work with the relevant planning and local authorities to see how we can work with industry to create more residential opportunities. And those residential opportunities don't need to be residential entirely. I think the best residential developments around stations then have that element of mixed use, so that they are lively, they are vibrant, and they create their own community at each of those locations. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity, I think, and certainly working across industry and working with other stakeholders to make that happen.
Okay, great.
I probably will just add that I think here at Sydney Olympic Park, we've seen Sydney Metro recognise that housing is a key priority, and there's a modification in the planning at the moment to make that potentially all residential. So I think we're seeing where it makes sense that there is that move away from commercial to residential. We still need to provide commercial floor space so that there's jobs near homes. But yeah, I think that we are reacting to the current crisis at the moment.
No, that's a good pivot. So Lindy, looping you back in, the question here is, what is the role of local government in ensuring that a TOD is as much a great place to live as it is an answer to the housing supply challenge? And what does the sector need from the state and federal government to ensure this?
The first thing is we need a seat around the table. We know our communities best. We know how they will interact with housing and development. So I think it's very critical that local government has a voice in this space. With the changing demographics that occur in local government areas, you cannot just do cookie cutter development. It actually needs to respond to the community's needs. It needs to reflect the demographics. For example, if you are doing density in housing and you have a very large culturally diverse community, often they're wanting intergenerational living. These are the things that need to be considered, and these are the things that local government knows best.
Well said. Okay, the next question we've got here is, what is the government doing to address the impacts on schools and healthcare and other critical services from the increased population in a TOD?
So schools and health are, so I'll see what our role as Infrastructure New South Wales with the TODs and everything else is to advise government on what they need from across all the different infrastructure. So starting from, we said the TODs are generally around transport, so most of the times, at least in the near term, we don't need a huge amount of infrastructure around transport because we've already invested it. But we need community infrastructure, we need open space, we need active travel, and we need, in many cases, not all the time, schools and hospitals a bit different. The catchment areas and these things are quite different to schools, which are a lot more direct. But government is aware of which areas will need schools investment, some not in the next 5 years, some longer than that, and so on. So they're across all the different elements, including in some cases emergency services and other things. So we're looking at every infrastructure asset class that is needed in these areas and advising government on what they need when.
Okay, perfect. So, sorry. I guess randomly, should we have more residential developments in city centres to support housing supply, for any of you?
I think that's what we're trying to, I think the government policy is shifting a lot of residential supply to happen in the established areas. So that naturally means it's closer to the centres of activity because that's where a lot of the investment in the past has happened. It doesn't mean that the greenfield areas are disappeared. It's where it's kind of shifted, or the heavier weight of where the growth is, it seeks to see is in those established areas.
Can I add to that? I think we need to be very careful and sensitive to the fact that not everybody wants to live in an apartment. That we need diversity in housing stock, and there are some areas that are still well able to deliver that for government. So while you have greenfield development, it should still be on the table and give those high quality of life and living experiences. It is why a lot of people move out to Campbelltown and Macarthur largely, is for the quality of life. So I do think it's really important that we provide a diversity of housing stock, because density and apartment living isn't for everyone.
And just to add, it's still, for the housing targets of government, a significant chunk is still in the greenfield areas, but also some of what would have classified as greenfield in, say, the northwest growth areas, and some of these are almost, you can kind of equate them to established areas, because they've grown faster than previous plan had anticipated. They've got metro lines already extended to them, and some potentially happening in the future. So in some way, it's quite difficult sometimes. Maybe Macarthur is a specific area where you've got very greenfield in parts of it, but it's, the distinction is not that simple anymore.
No, but the problem is that while those greenfield developments are continuing and the infrastructure planning and transport planning isn't keeping pace with that, you are creating isolated communities, and that is happening today and has been happening for many years.
And I'll pass to Fiona now for the closing words, because we're almost at time.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I do think the housing typologies that we need to think about in Western Sydney are very different to what inner city is going to be. In inner city, densification is going to be probably through height and apartments. And then I think as we do move out there, we do have to think about different typologies, and thinking about that now ahead of when the metro's delivered is what we probably need to really think about.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So we are at time now. So please join me in thanking our panel for the thought-provoking session. Thank you.